report of Tippett's shooting first came over the Dallas police radio at around 1:15 o'clock, the most pertinent question the police supervisors had for the dispatch officers was, what was Tippett doing in Oak Cliff? And none of the dispatch officers had an answer. Determined to understand how one of their own came to be killed in a place where he wasn't supposed to be, the Dallas Police Department, on that very same evening, pored over every single second of all the police radio recordings and scanned every entry in all the radio logbooks and compiled a thoroughly comprehensive list of every communication made that day involving Tippett. But missing from that list was any dispatch given at any time instructing Tippett to leave his district for what would become the scene of his own murder. And when November 22nd finally came to a close, the question, what was Tippett doing in Oak Cliff, was still very much an open mystery, and would officially remain so for months. Now, this may come as a surprise to some, but in 1963 it was not yet a federal crime to kill the president. And accordingly, the murder of John F. Kennedy fell under the legal jurisdiction of Texas authorities. But just an hour and a half after the assassination, the Secret Service agents at Parkland Memorial Hospital, fresh off the spectacular failure of their one sworn duty to protect the life of the president, rammed his corpse through a barricade of Parkland Hospital doctors who vehemently and correctly protested that by law the body must remain in Texas for an autopsy to be performed by their resident pathologist. And once having stolen the body in every legal sense of the word, the federal government rushed it to the United States Naval Hospital in Bethesda, Maryland for an autopsy to be performed by military-controlled doctors. And as an aside, it must be mentioned that the descriptions of the president's bullet wounds in that autopsy report bore no resemblance to the wounds treated by the attending physicians at Parkland Hospital's Trauma Room 1.
I stepped up and looked. I could see that he had a large, about 7-centimeter opening in the right occipital-parietal area.
Almost a fifth or perhaps even a quarter of the right back part of the head in this area here had been blasted out. I thought it was probably an exit wound because high-velocity missiles will enter through a rather small opening, and by creating a blast effect and by the tumbling of the bullet, it will then, as it exits the body, leave a large hole.
A considerable portion of the brain was missing there, and the scalp had been torn apart there, and the skull had been blasted open by the effect of the high-velocity missile.
But 6 hours later in Bethesda, Maryland, this turned into this. That large gaping exit wound from the back of the president's head, which by inescapable logic means he was shot from the front, had somehow shrunk down into a clean little wound of entrance, consistent with a shot fired by Lee Harvey Oswald from the southeast corner, 6th floor window of the Texas Schoolbook Depository Building. Now, the autopsy report did include this x-ray, which seems to prove that regardless of what the Parkland Hospital doctors all witnessed, the back of the president's head was essentially intact. However, the next day, a large fragment of the president's skull was found on the lawn in Dealey Plaza. And this large fragment belonged to the same part of the skull which the Parkland Hospital doctors all said was completely blasted out, leaving behind a hole so large
I could see inside President Kennedy's head.
So then it scarcely needs mentioning that unless this skull fragment found a way to spend the evening of the 22nd lying on the grass in Dallas, Texas, while simultaneously posing for this x-ray in perfect position inside Kennedy's head 1,300 miles away in Bethesda, Maryland, then this x-ray and this photo are complete fakes, and the autopsy report itself a total work of fiction. And this autopsy began at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the day of the assassination, 4.5 hours before Oswald was even charged with killing the president. And already the federal government was manufacturing evidence that pointed towards his guilt.